So hi. Yeah, you start talking. So I would be.
It looks like this. Um, and it is kind of a state of the nation family saga, tragic love story set in the Irish Midlands on a potato farm in the rack and ruin of post crash Ireland. And the narrator, Doherty Black, he lives at home and he's working his bankrupt farm, the family's bankrupt farm, and helping his much loved ailing father. And his brother Cormac is the first person in their family to go to university, and kind of he goes off and leaves Hart behind to look after things, and kind of the rivalry between them comes to the fore over the course of the novel, when they have to make a really difficult decision that will change the course of the family's future. Well, I have a rather unusual writing process, which is that I don't know what I'm writing at all when I start out. I have really no idea. I don't plan. I take zero notes. I don't like to know where I'm going, so I usually just start with a character in some kind of context. Whether it's just a kind of an image of them in a particular scene, and I remember the image that I started with for the Wild Laughter, and it isn't in the book actually, but it gave me the kind of atmosphere of the novel. And it's a first person narrative. I normally don't write in first person because of the fact that as soon as you have a narrator, you tend to have somebody listening, or there's an implied audience. And so that makes it very hard to write into the dark, because you already have to know to a certain degree who the story is being told to. So this is really the only first person piece of writing I've ever done. But it did come as a kind of a monologue. So I had the sense from the beginning that there was this kind of rural, repressed Irish bachelor, which is a stereotype in Irish literature, demanding that his story be heeded and desperately needing it to be worthy of telling. Sometimes it's images, other times it's maybe something closer to tensions or like atmospheres. It's a bit like I think it's more like music than it is like visual art. I don't see something complete in any kind of frame. I more get like a phrase, a musical phrase, or like a key signature or something like that. So it's maybe it is quite visual is the word synesthesia when you mix up your senses. um, because yeah, both of my novels are very much driven by scenes. Especially my first novel. It's all scenes. And in this, I think, book as well, probably what readers will remember from it are specific scenes. Well, it was a really transformative residency for me. It might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but it really wasn't. I think it was the first residency I'd done. I had never been in that context before. I didn't do an MFA or anything, so it was my first time being kind of writing in within a community. And even though they weren't necessarily a community of other writers, they were a community of readers. And I'd never really felt that before. I'd worked in a corporate job and I'd done a PhD, but it was very memorable for me. And also, it was my very first time writing short stories. So probably because I didn't do an MFA, I started writing novels. I started out with poetry, and then when I moved to fiction, I started with novels, and I wrote three before I ever wrote a short story, which is not recommendable. But the first short story that I wrote was in the James Merrill House, and it's called Psychobabble. I didn't really think about profession very much when I was younger, but I have always written. Even when I mean I remember I wrote a pastiche of Father Ted. I don't know if you know the TV show from the 80s or 90s. When I was 10, that was put on at school. I was writing I've been writing as far as I can, as long as I can remember. But it would have been, yeah, it would have been mostly poetry. And, but that said, as much as I've always been writing it, I remember in my mid 20s realizing like, I needed to cop on and I needed to write a lot more. And I needed to be willing to throw out 100,000 words, in a 2 year period, and and that's really where it became serious because as much as I'd always been writing, I'd never been spending enough time writing, and you can tell from if you have a hobby how much time you need to spend to improve your skill set. It means that each of my books will probably be different, and this might completely destroy my career. um, because already, like, my first book is really different to my second, and the first is very urban and very kind of cynical, and it's just working on a totally operating in a different way to the second novel, which is seemingly much more kind of tragic, melancholic, romantic, very, very kind of heart on the sleeve sort of a book, and very rural, and so they're so. Uh, I think this is because of the fact that I've moved around so much. I like shifting environments, and I want to be able to do that in my work, and to be able to shift kind of mindsets as well that come with different environments. So I will always be an Irish writer, but I guess the new kind of Irish writers post, um, certainly post 2008, but also of the generation where emigration wasn't so imbued with tragedy. Um, Yeah, I think I do want it to be. I do want it to be different. I won't try and contrive it to be so, but I think it will. I trust that it will, because after that amount of time passes in your life, your preoccupations are different. You're obsessed with different things. Hopefully, your philosophical inquiries are changed and are deeper. And you shouldn't be able to paraphrase them, but maybe by the time you've written a novel you can you've synthesized them somehow. Sure, thank you. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the first 2 pages or so, and you don't need to know anything. It's the opening. The night that Sheaf died, I lost my father, and the country lost a battle it wouldn't confess to be fighting. For the no-collared labouring class, for the decent, dependable patriarch, for right of entry from the field into the garden. Jurors were appointed to gauge the casualty. They didn't wear black. Don't they know black is flattering? The truth isn't. They kept safe and silent. I didn't. When is a confession an absolution, and when is it a sentencing? I'd like to find out. I suppose there's only one outcome for souls like us, heavy-going souls the like of mine and the long-lost chiefs, and not a good one. But I'll lay it on the line, if only to remind the people of who they are. A far cry from neutral judicial equipment. Determining the depth of rot that's blackening the surface can't always be left to deities and legislators. Sometimes what's needed is to tie a string around the tooth and shut the door lively. Right there. Thank you so much. Thanks, Megan. Bye. Enjoy Stonington on my behalf.